Hey all, welcome to my channel. Um, it's something interesting I'm seeing lately, TikTok and such, but also with my cousins' kids and such, with Gen Zers specifically. It's kind of interesting to see, but as of recently, I was at a wedding. My Gen Z's Gen Z or cousins, I would say, or baby cousins, or even my cousins' children, basically, who are Gen Zers, like under the age of 20, basically, or 21, 22, basically. As well as recently, I was in Paso Robles or Santa Barbara, I think Santa Barbara, sorry, and Paso Robles actually, surprisingly enough. And I was seeing these. You could tell these were Gen Zers or maybe barely, the youngest, earliest age of millennials. But seeing them, they were basically carrying cameras, not your typical iPhone cameras, but like actual film cameras from back in the day. And I was like surprised to see that. Honestly, I mean, I'm not sure when this started coming about. Like going to the ends of basically being vintage or using vintage, and also in Santa Barbara there was this vintage shop, and I just happened to walk in there and like I was like, Jesus, a lot of this stuff is from the '80s, and I'm like, whoa, and all these kids were like, "Whoa, this is so cool." I go further back and I'm like seeing stuff from the '60s. I'm like, okay, lava lamps and such, all right. But some stuff from the '80s and '90s, these kids were like fawning over. I'm like, wait, what? And then I'm like, damn. But in any case, to show how old I am, basically at that point, and showing, I was like feeling old at that point. But quite honestly, seeing these kids again um, with these cameras, I'm like, wait, I don't think there are any film processing done at this point, like those photo booths, old photo booths, basically, where they, or sending in Kodak films or Polaroid films to whomever to basically to develop the film, unless you have to do it yourself. Now I know photography classes nowadays, you still have that ability to like still do it yourselves, but you have to get the appropriate materials needed. And that was kind of surprising to see that. But then there's also now this new trend that I'm seeing, which I don't know if it's good or not, but it's interesting to see like, and they look like Gen Zers and very young millennials. I think they were their early 30s. More specifically, the women and girls. They're basically going into these, I guess, bars or brunch, but they're dressing up as boomers, pretty or old, the elderly. They're dressing up as the elderly, as they are calling them boomers. More so to the point, I'm like, you see some people like look. I'm not sure if it's a thing, if it's a new fad, but I'm like kind of blown away as to why they would be doing this. Because like senior citizen discount, well, they're not going to get that unless they can produce IDs and such. But I'm like, is there a real reason? And I just I'm at a loss. It seems like it's a brunch thing more than anything else. I'm like, huh, okay. And sometimes there was one recently I saw. It was a bachelorette party. I'm like, they were like early 20s or mid 20s, I guess. I don't know, whatever it may be. And I'm like, okay. I was like, what the hell's going on here? I'm like, is there something? Is this a new thing? And like, one of the bartenders had mentioned to us. I was like, yeah, it's a thing nowadays where like kids come in, especially for bachelor parties, they come in dressed up as the elderly. I'm like, okay, I don't know how some people might think of that. And it's supposedly a thing or something like that. I don't know. But it's just weird. And like, it's one of those things where like you're seeing these newfound fads and such. I'm like, okay, it's only a matter of time. And like nowadays, I mean, it's throwing me off a little bit where they're saying like ankle socks or no show socks are now more out of style. And then, I don't want to say knee high, but calf socks are back in. And I'm like, okay, I remember them wearing them as a kid. But then, of course, now my dad would usually wear that stuff. I don't wear that. And I'm like, whoa. I'm like, nowadays it's like, it's back. I'm like, when did this happen? And I'm like, if you wear ankle socks or no show socks, it's like, you're out of style. I'm like, okay, it's kind of weird. But then again, when I was a kid, bell bottoms were back in at that time, and bell bottoms were big early on in the '90s. I'm like, okay, you know what? Making references to the '70s and '80s, or '70s and '60s. It was like one of those things. I'm like, all right, I can see that. So I mean, I'm not arguing against what's going on right now, but it's just like, all right, how long before the instant Polaroid cameras come back, or actually, I don't even know what else, because like I'm trying to remember stuff like I was gonna say is like how long before we see people starting to drink out of hoses? How long are they gonna drink out of, not out of hoses? Well, hoses is one thing from their backyards, but also, I mean, drinking out of tap water back then was pretty. It was okay. And then like latchkey kids, seeing kids with keys around their necks and such. Like nowadays, it's even though it's smart locks and everything like that. But in any case, it's just so weird to see. And like, if you are a Gen Xer or even maybe one of the elder millennials, you would remember some of this stuff, and like you're kind of wondering like what's going on. I mean, let me know if you've seen this stuff as well too. I mean, put it please put it in the comment section. I do read those comments and I do respond to them. But let me know your thoughts. I mean, like, I don't know. And like, do you see another fad coming about? Like, what new fad are these darn Funko kids going to come up with, basically, at this point? But outside of that, let me know your thoughts. If you like my channel, like my videos, like my content, please subscribe if you haven't subscribed. With that, I'll leave it at that. Unfiltered, unedited, and of course, always unrehearsed. Until next time.